In the 1780s, the biggest issue politically was how are we going to structure the government? The country's operating under the Articles of Confederation, which had been approved in 1781, but the Articles created a very weak government. It was basically a league of independent states, but the states all had their own authority and their own sovereignty, to use the technical term. And it was very difficult to run that government. George Washington had complained bitterly during the Revolution that they couldn't get anything done because the Confederation Congress had no power, it had no authority. Now, the most obvious problem, but far from the only one, was that the national government, the Confederation, had no authority to collect taxes. And so George Washington, when he was trying to feed his troops, get uniforms for his troops, get gunpowder and so on, it was very difficult for the national government even to have funding. What they did was they would requisition funds from the state. So the Confederation would say, New York, you need to send us $1 million. Virginia, we need $1.5 million. Pennsylvania, we need $750,000. And each of the states was supposed to send the money to the national government. Well, they had always been slow in sending the money that was requisitioned. And by the mid-1780s, they simply aren't sending the money. The states are not honoring the requisitions from the Confederation Congress. By 1787, the Confederation is in default. The United States is basically bankrupt. Add to that Shays' Rebellion in 1786 to 87 up in western Massachusetts, where western Massachusetts farmers who had been subject to very high taxes, they had been subject to foreclosure on their properties when they didn't pay their taxes. These are taxes from Massachusetts, obviously. The national government has no tax authority. But these farmers who were really suffering severe economic problems, there's also a post-war economic recession, very common after a war, and they basically took up arms, much like they had in the Revolution, and they closed the courts, and they were really challenging the legal regime because they believed that the eastern urban powers in Boston were acting unfairly to the small farmers in western Massachusetts. Well, this was a huge threat to stability, as a threat of anarchy, and there were similar protests in other colonies, or other states. We're familiar with Shays' Rebellion, but there were similar problems in Virginia and Connecticut and some of these other states as well. Well, a number of the leaders, George Washington, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Henry Knox, viewed this as an enormous threat to the unity of the country. They thought that this type of anarchy, this opposition to legitimate state government, would simply dissolve the country. And what would happen is states would end up almost begging Britain to take them back into the British Empire. Well, we of course know what happens. The people who supported a stronger national government are able to get the Philadelphia Convention, what we know as the Constitutional Convention.